Staffline's vision is to be the trusted market leader and provide a single destination for blue-collar workers and clients to connect right across the UK. The reason that Staffline exists is simply to make our customers more successful, and that's also part of what today's about. So when I say making our customers more successful, I mean the 50 or 60,000 employees who we place into work in any given day, but also the 1,600 or so prestigious brands that we do business with. And where most of you rely on us, of course, is in uplifting volume and sudden additional demand, particularly in peak trading periods. We'll be looking at some new technology and new innovation as to how we can add to our applicant attraction strategy, and we've got some videos to show you on that. And then, of course, this afternoon, we're delighted to have Matthew Taylor with us. Kevin Green was the HR Director at Royal Mail. For the last 10 years, Kevin has been the CEO of the REC. So if you want to come up and join us. So what do you think of the current health of the UK labour market?
I think it's really, really healthy. I think there are a number of things that we most probably need to recognise, and there are some challenges that come out of it. The first thing, I suppose, is we've got record employment. There's more people employed in the UK now than ever before, 32 million. That's good news. We have the second highest employment rate globally, over 75%. We've got incredibly low unemployment, 4.2%. So, you know, if you look at our labour market in comparison with other developed economies, people would say we're doing really, really well. But for clients, and many of you in this room, you know, you are struggling with three sets of shortage: labour shortage, skill shortage, and talent shortage. And they are three different things, actually. So again, if it's some of the jobs that you and Staffline would certainly, you know, people working on factory floors, picking and packing, you know, we find it difficult, and I've been with you to a few clients, to find people to fill those jobs. There's just not enough people that really are keen to get up and do those jobs. In terms of skill shortage, I think, you know, we historically have had problems with digital, engineering, IT. But it's now pervasive. HGV drivers, chefs, I can go teachers, nurses, doctors in the public sector. You can go look at most areas of the labour market and see that we have not got enough people with the skills and experience for the jobs that are available. And then if I think about it from a more HR perspective, you know, it's difficult to find talent. So even if I can find people with the skills, I'm looking for the people that are great at leading and motivating teams. I'm looking for people that are strategic thinkers. I'm looking for people that like living and managing change. And if you really start to think about that, what you can see in most organisations is we're struggling with labour, we're struggling with skill, and we're struggling with talent. And the issue for me is that's a consequence of being very, very successful. You know, the labour market really is working, and we're working incredibly effectively. But the problem with those shortages is they're only going to get worse. You look at the macro trends, and there's 3 or 4 that I'd like to pull out. It is going to get worse over the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And I will be controversial, because I am, when I talk to the government quite a lot, or was talking to the government quite a lot, but we need more immigration, not less. You know, we've got skill shortages, labour shortages. If we continue to grow our economy, we're going to need more people to do the jobs that are available rather than less. But if you just look at it from a macro point of view, you know, you've got an ageing population. We're going to have less people of working age in the next 10 years in the labour market. You know, we the baby boomers, my generation, we're leaving work. We're thinking about how we go off and do.
I thought you were blooming.
I'm blooming, but it's a late bloom. You know, we're going to go off and do other things. I mean, I think most people my age are going to continue to work, but perhaps in a different way. But, you know, we're coming out of the labour market, and that was the big post-Second World War boom, when our parents had us during the sort of 60s and through to the early 70s. Then we had the whole contraception thing, and the birth rate dropped. And that's the working population for the next 10 to 15 years. And then our kids are coming into the labour market. My son's just started, been in it a year. He's an enigma to me. I love him dearly. After 7 months, he told me that he thought he might need to have that year off. He never heard, you know, that gap year. And I did point out, I've been at this 37 years, I haven't quite got to my gap year, so you might need to leave it a little longer. So my challenge to you, to the HR community and leaders is, we're hiring apprenticeships and graduates like it's going out of fashion. as we struggle to fill, because of skills, talent shortages that we started with, we're hiring young people. The issue with those young people is they are going to suck up the learning and development, and then after 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, they're going to go off and do their own thing. So what I'm saying to you is this is the situation in our labour market. We have labour, skill and talent shortages today that are going to be made worse because we are going to have more and more professionals and managers opting out because of flexibility and the opportunity to get a better lifestyle at the same money. We've got less people to choose from, the actual population is shrinking, and all the young people are going to be sucking up the learning development to go off and do their own thing. So the crisis of retaining people within your organisation is going to become that much harder. And then we get to the self-inflicted wound of Brexit, which has been interesting, shall we say, because just, you know, so I was talking about what I've just been talking about 2, 3 years ago, and then you go, okay, so we've got 2.2 million people working in the UK from Europe. That's 7% of all of the workforce. But if you look at geographical areas and sectors, there are sectors and part of the labour market that have huge exposure. Not just to people at the front end of the labour market, which I'll get to in a moment, but 37% of all the academics in the UK come from Europe. In pharmaceutical, it's 14%. And I can go on and on and on. If you look at geography, there are areas where we have major issues. 500,000 people in hospitality in London alone. Okay? So we're very dependent on labour. And if you think about a lot of the activity that you do, and I know we've had these conversations, lots of people from eastern parts of Europe come and work over here, really good workers, got a great work ethic. A couple of things are happening. One is that they are going home and not going back. And secondly, we're attracting less people from Europe than we were originally. So, you know,
and from different places.
And from different places. So we were bringing in 300,000 net every year. Last year it was 200,000, and it will continue to drop because it's becoming less attractive. I mean, devaluation of the pound doesn't help. But the whole thing is about Brexit as you know, it's coloured people's view of the UK. And why would I go and work there and raise my children and, you know, make a living? Why don't I? So we've got some real issues. And again, if you think about the macro picture that I've just described, you know, without European workers, our labour market situation is going to get that much worse.
Despite this, a bit of suggestion of the intent, at least, was this recent statement that people can stay beyond Brexit and there'll be freedom of movement up to you know, at least 2020. They're trying to support it, aren't they? But I think it's in recognition and maybe a bit late. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things going on. I mean, politically, and again, I'm not even doing the REC job now, so I can be even more forthright. I mean, I think one of the things that you have to remember is that businesses don't vote. You have no vote. But citizens do. Can't win a marginal seat. You
can't win a marginal seat by appealing to business. But if you want to win power, and the number 2 issue through all the focus groups, and if you think about Brexit, is immigration, then if you're a politician coming up with a policy which says we are going to curtail immigration, there's only going to be, you know, the tens of thousands, 100,000, is a vote winner. If you think about the Labour Party, historically the party of immigration, also haven't got a policy on it and won't comment on it and walking back from it, you know that it plays incredibly well electorally. Now at the same time, the CBI, British Chamber of Commerce, the REC, the IOD and every single business body is going to government, you are going to create a problem that is always difficult for business, is going to get worse. And you really need to think about it. But the thing that you learn through doing the job that I've done is politics trumps economics every single time. So I think we've got a real long-term job of trying to convince the government to think differently about immigration. I'll let you ask the question, but if you want me to predict what I think will happen in immigration.
That's what it says. Thank you.
But we've talked about this before, Mark, haven't we? You know, which is, at the front end of the labour market, I suspect what they will do, and again, this is all conjecture, but it is based on lots of conversations with people in the Home Office.
So just talk, give us a bit of context. You've been in and out of Number 10, you've been talking to ministers. What do they say? What do you get behind closed doors that they obviously can't go and lose votes and marginal seats on?
Well, they are very clear that they believe the Brexit vote was hugely influenced by immigration, and that the whole campaign swung once the Leave people focused on that. They also know that when they do their focus groups and their data collection, it's a really important issue, particularly in marginal seats. So for them, this is politically very, very important. They sort of smile at business, and it's quite frustrating. So they sort of understand what we're going to say to them before we say it. And they understand the reality, and that makes it that much more difficult, really, because they recognise that the labour market's quite tight. They know businesses are finding it difficult, but if they've got a choice between electoral success and appeasing government, they'll go for electoral success, I'm afraid. So there's a bit of that. I think they are listening. I think the bit about extending it, during the transition period, trying to keep freedom of movement open, I think they are trying to. I think they underestimated the strength of feeling and the importance of this from a business community. So I think they are beginning to wheel back a little bit, but they're still sticking to their target of net migration of 100,000.
Yet privately, they don't think for 1 minute they're going to hit that target. No, and actually, they recognise the UK economy would be massively punished if they hit that target.
But I think there's a couple of things that they're keen to do. So they will do it gradually over time. So I think they do recognise it's not not a cliff edge that will be really detrimental to business. So we'll do this in and we'll phase it in. Two is they've got to show the numbers coming down, because if you say you're going to do stuff about immigration, you don't, then electorally you've got a major problem. So they will reduce the numbers. The numbers are being reduced already without them doing very much. So they will. The two things that we anticipate happening is at the top end of the labour market, they'll end up with a visa regime, like very similar to the people that come from outside of Europe at the moment, and they will then give a little bit of a weighting, an advantage to Europeans. So if the threshold is a salary level of say 30k, they might say for Europeans it's 25. So that they're likely to create some kind of advantage for Europeans so that they can throw that into the mix when they're negotiating the EU. However, at the front end of the labour market, it's likely to be, and all the rhetoric seems to point in this direction, is some kind of work permit scheme. And the work permit scheme, you've got to have a guaranteed job.
Yeah.
We have,
which they would have to be offered in their home country before.
And we go, what do you mean by a permanent job? Could recruiters do it? So could Staffline do it? And they go, oh, I don't know. So that's open for interpretation. And then secondly, it would be for a limited period of time. So, when they were talking about 6 months, we started talking about 2 years, and you might end up with somewhere in between.
12 months. Everything you described there from Staffline's point of view is something which we're starting to model and we're starting to gear up for, and having to use agents in Europe or use our own operations in Europe to migrate people in is already a well-trodden path, but also to be able to do that and have a department that looks after a visa system is something which we're starting to put in place. Taking people on permanently, when we got between 50 and 60,000 people, we've got about between 12 and 14,000 permanent people work in that workforce today. So just increasing that number to be 75% of our workforce is not a problem, but it's the uncertainty of knowing when that's likely to happen and exactly what that policy is going to look like that is creating the biggest headache for us, really, because achieving it is not an issue. It's knowing when and how to mobilise it so you can make a proper plan.
The work from the Migration Advisory Committee isn't going to report to the end of the year. The white paper on immigration won't be published till next year. We've now got a new Home Secretary, so if anything, that will move out. So we aren't going to get clarity anytime soon. What I think that means for your clients and the people in the room is I think you've got to get better at thinking creatively about where you find people. It's going to get harder. It's going to get more difficult. So you're going to have to be that more creative, and you have to work with partner organisations like Staffline to be able to come up with the right solutions. You're likely to have to pay a little bit more. You're going to have to think about retention and how do you hang on to this resource, how do you treat it, what benefits do you get it, because it's going to become even more of a scarce resource. So, I think in terms of the environment you're working in, I'm sorry to be the voice of doom, but it's just going to get tougher. So I think you've just got to be thinking about this and preparing your businesses. People still think it's easy to hire and fire people and to get people in and out of organisations, but it really isn't at the moment. And I'm sure many of you are dealing with that on a daily basis. But other people it takes quite a while for the mindset within businesses to change.
So that's why I gave those couple of examples at the beginning, that there as a result of a downturn in volume and or a change in requirement, we're able to move people pretty seamlessly elsewhere. From Staffline's point of view, our view is that the quicker we can accelerate the growth of our business to extend that platform, the more we can offset and put customers' requirements together by marrying up one client's peak with another client's trough in volume and sort of marrying them up more accurately. Is that how you see the trend progressing?
I think that's certainly part of it, absolutely, which is you can create volume, and if you're representing different parts of the UK economy and labour market, then you can balance some of those peaks and troughs and support your clients through that when they need to turn down labour or turn it up. I think Staffline's well positioned. I mean, you've done a lot of that with your government contracts, but I think there's an opportunity.
We have a view that this vision of ours of being a single destination, you know the challenges that come with working for one agency 1 week and then signing off from them and going somewhere else, and the tax implications and the changes. We have a view that progressively more now people will choose Staffline, because if you look at the sort of just the 40 or 50 odd brands that are on that screen there that are in the room today, people can, for no other reason other than just the sake of variety and wanting to try another culture, can move and go somewhere else for a period of time, go to a competitor and stay with Staffline. Do you see flexible working progressing in that way right across the country?
I think that's one. I think there will be organisations like Staffline that build size and scale, because you're trying to meet a whole range of requirements, 40, 50, 60, 100 clients at the same time. And what that gives you is the bit we talked about, the ability to move people around all those different employers. So that is one model that will definitely work.
And on that point, Kevin, that's where for us we know we've got to get better at creating people, not a CV, but a career path. So they might join us as an unskilled person, but it's how we wrap skills around them and get them to move around our client base to experience new things and to create a career for themselves, because then they stick with us. So obviously the apprenticeship levy was an effort to give employers a say in how people are educated for the future of work. What more can be done to get education, the education system, to educate people to come out of education with the right skills for the future, with the polarisation of the jobs market you referred to?
I mean, I've been banging on about this for a long time, so it's not a new subject. And I think there's a lot of vested interest in education. It is what it is. It's how it's always been. So the issue, I think, is business needs to be more specific and more practical, and we need to get involved more. I mean, I think we sit on the, every year the CBI and the IOD and the REC did it as well. We do a survey of employers, and they'd say, every year we'd say the same thing. They're not coming out, they haven't got the right skills, work ethic's not there, communication skills, blah, blah. And then you think, well, what are we doing to change that? We have a bit of a moan about government in closed rooms, and they just ignore us and carry on. So I think we have to make much more of a statement, particularly if they're going to introduce policies which are going to make it difficult for us. I think we need to go, well, if you're going to do that, then you need to help us with some of this. But I mean, you've got to work with your partners in a strategic way. You've got to engage them in understanding your culture and understanding how you do stuff, so that they can, they're out there trying to find talent and people on your behalf. They're your brand ambassadors, and they've got to feel that it is a relationship, that there is value on either sides of that relationship, and it isn't just if it's just a transactional purchase and it's based on price, then you're going to end up not getting the best suppliers to work with. And I think that is something I would say. I mean, the whole piece of research we did with the CIPD and SIPS was all about what does a good relationship look like between a client and an agency, and it is about working with them, reciprocal, involve them, engage them, share stuff, collaborate, come up with creative answers, and you can only do that if you work together. If it is about, I phoned you up yesterday and you were meant to get 120 and you've got 110 and you're crap and I'm really unhappy, and what you're going to do about it? Well, I know operationally there's always that pressure, but that's not the relationship which is, and people forget, I can say this, you can't, you have choice about where you put your labour. If you've got that pool of labour and you've got 5 organisations that could all do it, you're going to think about, who am I working with? Who do I get more value with? Who do I want to work with? How can I help support their relationship, because they're going to help me in the long term, because one, they meet me, two, we work together. You know, and that's the reality of building long-term strategic partnerships, is it works on both sides. So I think we've got to move away from labour being seen as a transactional cost into something where you've got to invest in it, and you've got to think about, where do we find these people, when we find them. Even if they are flexible resource, we still want them to come back. We don't want to have a horrible experience, because they'll all just leave middle of shift, end of shift, and won't come back. So we've actually got to think about frontline staff, even people in our factories and warehouses and drivers, and as a scarce resource, and treat them accordingly. Otherwise, you will lose out to your competitors, because they will pay them more, treat them better, and they will stay there. So we have to move this whole debate, you know, away from this transactional stuff into a thoughtful, strategic part of running an organisation. Even though that we still want to flex and respond to peaks and troughs.
Yeah, we've just on that point, we'll show a video in a minute that shows what we're doing around our worker experience management programme, which is getting insights into how people are feeling about working for Staffline and working on each of our customers' premises. And what we're starting to see is the trends of, there's a direct correlation, obviously, we're in this together, that each of our customers have got some sites that outperform others. Yeah. And of course, the sites where the workers are more satisfied at, productivity tends to be higher because attrition's lower, and the sites where they're less satisfied, it's the opposite scenario. And so we're in it together, because the sites that have got the attrition problems, from a Staffline point of view, obviously costing us much more in advertising and recruitment, and we're spending all of our time recruiting to replace churn. So what we actually want to do is, rather than do that, focus our time and energy into making it an engaging place to work, and that's working with our contract managers to make them more engaging, and recognise that it's that friendly face and supportiveness at the start of every shift that goes the extra mile, and stepping in when people are having a bad experience. Now, going back to the point, that's about working collaboratively. We need to sit down regularly with you as clients to be able to share these insights and be open and honest about where we need to improve and where our customers need to improve.
Yeah, I think there's two things I think I'd say about that. One is you've got to understand the cost of getting it wrong. So if you're in that environment where, you know, people are leaving, we're having to work really hard to find people, they come for a period and then disappear, the cost of inducting, training, getting them up to speed, and that whole process, you need to work out what that's costing you, and think, well, actually, if we took that cost and halved it and invested in it, in training people a bit better at the front end, paying them a bit more, doing it a bit more effectively, making sure that managers are treating them as an employee or someone that's hugely important, actually it'll pay off, because there is a relationship. I mean, in my HR days, in every organisation I've worked in as a consultant and I'm a great believer in customer service profit chains. So you measure your employee satisfaction on a regular basis by team, you align it to customers, you align it to, you know, loyalty, retention of customers, spend, and you'll get superior. But actually you can go back down that profit chain. But the thing I get a lot in organisations is we're not really understanding the impact of treating people well has on the performance of a business, and having the empirical evidence to demonstrate that's important. And I think agencies like Staffline have a role to play in that.
So because the innovation we put in, Kevin, we've got feedback that surprised us, that sectors we thought were going to be less attractive are actually significantly outperforming sectors we thought were better places to work by nature of better rates of pay. But actually what we've found is that some sectors in particular have been able to, for years now, rely on, and because we could do it, he's no good, get me somebody else please, rather than the other sectors that have been less attractive in the past have recognised that the workers that they've got are the workers they've got to work with, because it's not a particularly attractive job. So they've made the whole worker experience really engaging. So the results that we got back were really surprising, you know.
No, it doesn't surprise me, but I think that it does show that you can address this problem. So the first thing, if you've ever got any kind of people issue, and it's about recruitment, is always start with retention. Always start with the people I've currently got. How do I hold them longer? How do I keep them? How do I progress them? How do I, you know, and then I can work with, and even if we're growing, so there's more people or we've got some churn, then let's think about the recruitment issue, but always start with the retention issue first.
So the challenge, I guess, where we need everybody's support is that people in this room understand these issues. It's the middle and lower management where they've still got this, could you get me 3 more tomorrow because I don't like the way you looked at me this morning kind of approach. You know, it's we've got an education piece to do to get these challenges out to all sectors that are deemed by the workforce to be less engaging and less attractive places to work.
And interestingly, I think, you know, if you do treat people at the front of your organisation well, it pays off. It just pays off in productivity. It pays off in culture, environment. You know, if you get into, you know, but I think you know that, and I'm sure most people here know that. But you do see, and I've been to some workplaces during my time at the REC where I just thought this doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right, and then you look at the numbers, and it wasn't right. You know. So, you know, you get what you pay for, and I think you've got to think about it strategically. There's loads of really good data, and Staffline can give you data on the labour market. There's information around immigration. You know, a lot of the information I talked about in passing today, you can get access to. And then finally, I would always make sure that you're working with really good agencies that are members of the REC and are highly professional and compliant, and Staffline are clearly one of those.
Okay, we're obviously going to welcome Matthew Taylor in this afternoon. And I know you've got some strong opinions because you have them on pretty much every subject. What are the, from your point of view, what are the potential unintended consequences of what Matthew's written in his report?
I thought it was a good report. I mean, I think you'll see Matthew this afternoon. I know him well. We did a session at the REC. I went and see him a couple of weeks ago. He wants to get me involved in some of his work. You'll see someone who's very passionate about doing it the right way, about employing people and being very careful that people aren't exploited or not treated well. And I think that's to be commended. I think many of his recommendations, the Good Work campaign is very similar to the Good Recruitment Charter, so we've endorsed that. You know, there are issues, I think, that have been about different levels of pay for people that haven't got fixed hours is interesting. If you know, the problem you say is that the recommendation isn't a bad one on its own. You know, that seems fair actually. I can see it at that level. The issue is, where do you draw a line? Yeah, exactly. So is it a year? Well, if it's a year, there's only about 1% of temps that get beyond a year. So actually, if we were going to pay them a little bit more, in light of what I've just been saying, actually, it must probably work for you guys as well. So that doesn't sound like a major problem. But government sometimes just do arbitrary things, you know. 12-week rule on AWR was plucked out of the air late one night. So you just have to be very careful with government, and then they go, well, why don't we make it 3 months? And then you're in a very different game. So I think there's a bit about that. So that point actually, on we've got some people already where flexible working, if they want to bring in a cohort of workers just for a week or a month for a peak, they might pay more than they do for the people that are there 51 weeks. So if it's interpreted that flexible working should be rewarded more in that way, absolutely fine. If, however, it's a broad brush, everybody working flexibly should be paid more than those that aren't, then that's completely lost sight of more than 50% of people choose to work for us because they want flexible working. So they want flexible work. And that's what I mean. Is so when you're crafting employment legislation, you often start with the right principle. You end up creating some kind of weird thing that employers and recruiters end up having to deal with for years. So that's one. The right to request is interesting. So again, when the right to request a permanent job, and Matthew was talking about that, I think if someone's been working a year, that's a very legitimate thing to ask. If there's a full-time job, could I have it? Yeah. I suspect most of you would be sort of quite open for that. However, well, we certainly are. So we would give them it. The bit that I have then over going is just about, you know, you could just see in some environments where you end up, again, the time scale, a year is fair, but if they brought it earlier, that might be more difficult. Because what you don't want to do is to create, particularly in a unionised environment or an environment where it's a little bit adversarial, you end up with, you know, rights of request going in, you have to write back formally to them, you know, and we end up in this big paper chase of trying to, you know, and actually doesn't help the individual, doesn't help it. So again, you know, how you create employment legislation that works for employers while you're trying to do the right thing by the worker, I think is the right way to do. The Swedish derogation is one that is a challenge, because I think there have been times when it hasn't been implemented effectively, really. And you go to employers and go, you've been using the Swedish derogation, can you just tell me how many people have been paid between assignment? And it sort of evaporates, and you go, well, come on guys, this, you know, we haven't perhaps implemented it in the spirit. And that's what, you know, I went to give evidence to Matthew Taylor's thing. The REC went, he did 12 road shows around the country. We made sure we had members at every one. I went to 3, gave evidence at 2. The audience, a room like this, was 2 or 3 employers, a couple of recruiters, and I would say 150 trade unionists. The trade unions influenced this report. Now, he won't have that. You could ask him this afternoon, but he won't have it. But they would, you know, they spent a huge amount of time in trying to influence that stuff by coming up with lots of anecdotal stories. Here is poor Fiona, she did this, da, 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 and here's poor George, and da, 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 da. And, you know, if you listen to enough of that, you know, it gets you. Whereas I think the vast majority of temps choose to work that way. I think the vast majority of them are treated well by their employers. And actually, while there are things that we would want to protect and we could want to change, we just need to do it in a way which means it works for everyone and you don't end up with unintended consequences.
Thanks very much, Kevin.
Thank you.